Hi guys, it's Jake here at Canadian Cutting Edge. It's Fixed Blade Friday again, and I've got a knife that was sent to me by GearBest. This is the TD-01. It's portrayed as a survival knife, so bushcrafting, outdoors, maybe even self-defense. It's got some weight to it. I did review a sibling of this knife about a year ago. And now there's just more options, and it seems to me that it's slightly refined from the previous version, although it has the same model number. GearBest has this in 3 variants right now. This is the black stonewash, which I like the best out of the whole bunch, and it just happens to be the lowest price of the 3 right now. It's at an 11% discount. Looks like it's a permanent discount, I'm not sure. Then they've got a black coated blade. I'm not sure what the coating is. And then they've got a coating that they're calling titanium, which is more of a dark gray coating. There is no satin version or just plain stonewash. They're all dark blades, all 3 of the options. G10 handle scales, nice thick blade stock. Has some weight to it with that fat G10 in there and this big steel pommel on the bottom. They call it a hammer. You've got the Chinese variant of Kydex for the sheath, belt loop up here, and I like that it's nice and high instead of a belt loop that's attached down here. That is much better for the weight distribution when it's hanging from your belt. And the blade fits in there quite well. Good retention. Takes a fair bit of force to pull it out. There's a slight rattle. You also get a ferro rod. It's got a decent handle on it, and it sits in place. It doesn't make any noise in there. So this whole kit, including a little bit of a diamond sharpening strip, is available for just over $50 Canadian. So if you're interested in a solid knife and you want to hear, well, you've already heard that I've got a positive tone of voice already about this thing. If you want to hear more about this knife, and stick around for the full review. You're probably already asking yourself, well, is it going to be worth that price? That's up to you, between you and your budget. For some people, $50 is way too much for a knife. For some people, $50 means the knife's probably garbage. And there's everybody in between. And I won't tell you what you should think about the price. I'm just going to review the quality of the item myself and tell you a little bit about my opinion of the whole system that we have here. Let's start with the sheath. It's a nice thin Kydex, so it doesn't add an awful lot of weight. I didn't put the weights on here. I'll put the weights on the screen right now of the knife and of the knife with the sheath. You can see the weights right down here. Yes, the weights seem a little bit high, and that's because you've got a thick stock here, a lot of steel here, and G10 is quite dense of a material, and so you've got a fair bit of weight there. The sheath is not very much at all. It's that very thin Kydex. I'm not sure how durable it's going to be. I think it's going to be just fine. I really like the system that they use here. That's one of the things that I appreciate more than most of the knives that you can get out of China these days for, outdoor kind of knives. They usually have a funky Tech-Lock imposter that bolts on right here. And so let me get my pants out. My fake pants, if you will. And so most of the time it's right there. And so it'll sit on your pants like this. Way high up. So here's your waist, and it's way there. This guy is going to sit with your belt down here. And so the weight is way down low. Not too much getting up here. It just sits better, and it looks better, and it's easier to grab. When it's up here, it's a little bit harder to grab. You got to sort of cock your elbow up in the air a little bit extra to pull at it. It's much more natural grab when it's down there. So that's one of the big pluses that I like. I have not used this sharpening system here. This diamond kind of thing. For one, it's probably fairly low quality. It's not going to be a really good quality thing, which means it's not going to sharpen very often. So I don't want to wear it out. If there ever was an emergency situation when I was out with just this knife and I needed to sharpen it, I want whatever's left of here to be there for me. So I'm not going to wear it down now because, guaranteed it's not going to last awful long. If you, don't want the ferro rod at all, you could undo those two and it's still going to look quite good. It's going to make it look a little bit thinner. So here it is without the ferro rod system. Nice and small and sleek. I like it better this way. I would probably come up with some kind of system using, some of this shock cord to tie just a different piece of ferro rod onto the side and have it be much smaller. Something that you could easily take off. Not quite sure how that would look right now, but I think I'd rather do that. So that's the sheath. The knife, you've got pretty large torque screws right here. If you wanted to take the handle scales off to clean underneath there or something. Let's say, for example, it did start to rust a little bit on you. You might want to take it apart and really clean it out really well. You've got a lanyard hole back here and 2 holes up here. And those are designed so that if you wanted to, you could strap this to a long, thin piece of wood and make an improvised spear. My ideas of a spear made out of a knife are probably one that you've heard before if you've been around the channel for a while. I think it's a stupid idea. I would rather take a nice piece of wood, some good young hardwood, so it's still got a little bit of flex to it so it won't break too easy, and make a nice point on it. Then you've got a spear and a knife, instead of having a knife tied onto a spear where there's a good chance it's going to break, because all the stress is involved of poking something with a joint being right at the end of it. It just doesn't make sense. And you could make a piece of wood quite sharp with a knife like this, that it'll puncture through the skin of most animals and certainly scare them off quite well. For hunting purposes, you probably don't want to use a spear anyways, and a stick is going to work just as good as a knife tied onto a piece of wood. So that's my idea. I would take my knife, make a spear, and hold the knife in the other hand. Now I've got 2 things instead of 1. So D2 steel on here. The designer here is Super TD. He's a Chinese guy who's probably China's equivalent of Bear Grylls. You can just barely see it. It says Super TD right there. And we've got this fire logo here, and that's because the spine has been sharpened to a really sharp 90-degree edge right here. I am going to test and see how well it throws sparks just from this edge here where the jimping is. Maybe they didn't need to do this. Who knows? We'll see. Then we've got a full flat grind, a nice plunge line here, a little sneak up choil right there that you can use if you're going to do some more delicate, precise kind of work. Jimping also on the handle, at the end, on the belly, and on the end on the spine. So you can get all kinds of grips with this knife that are very comfortable, easy to use, and, it's a knife that you can hold pretty much every way you would want to ever hold a knife. Let's talk about the dimensions of everything on this knife. So this D2 steel cutting edge is 8.7 centimeters, 3.34 inches. The blade length from the tip of the blade to the handle up here is 9.8 centimeters, 3.86 inches. And the thickness of the blade stock here, 4¼ millimeters, that's 0.1675 inches. The thickness of the edge behind the grind, it's fairly sturdy, fairly stocky right there. It's 0.89 millimeters, which is 0.035 inches. And you want it, very much that thickness if you're going to use it to do some batoning or anything like that. You don't want like a 0.5 millimeter thickness back there. It's just too thin to be strong enough. The handle thickness is about 2 centimeters at the thickest spot right here, which is 0.784 inches. Of course, it's thinner back here and thinner up here. The handle length is 12.15 centimeters, which is 4.78 inches. And the grip space back here behind this front choil to the end of the handle is about 10 centimeters, which is 3.95 inches. And the total length of this knife is 21.9 centimeters. I forgot to write it down. On the screen is the total length in inches. The balance point is very much right here. So if the balance point is behind your index finger, the weight of this chunk of steel back here, they might not have done any skeletonizing. And that's a really handle heavy kind of weight. And I like the weight to be a little bit more forward. And so that's the other con. So there you go. Let's do some cut tests inside, and then we'll do some cut tests outside. I've got some Ethernet cable right here. Cuts through that, no difficulties. Here's 4 strands of paracord. Went through that fairly well, a little bit, it's not quite as good as I want it to be, and that's partly to do with thickness behind the grind. And from the factory, it's sharp, but it's not super sharp. It passes the nail nick test, but once I sharpen it, it'll be a whole lot better. But most people want to see what it's like from the factory. And from the factory, the blade is quite nice, but not stupid sharp at all. And, I really don't mind that at all. I'm going to sharpen my own knives anyway, and hopefully you do too. So there's the factory edge. You've got a fairly thin tip right there. I don't do tip tests anyways, because I think that it's not very wise. You're just asking to break your knife, and then you lose some of that cutting edge. The tip is thin, which means it's designed for doing more delicate work. So of course it's not going to pass every, jam it in and, bend it off kind of test. It's not designed for that. I tend to test my knives to see if they pass what they're designed to do. Maybe I'm old-fashioned that way. Maybe I'm just old. I don't know. I like to test how well the belly of the knife can dig into a flat piece of wood. That tells you something about the thickness behind the grind and how well it works. Because sometimes you might want to make, some bushcrafter guys, they make spoons. And so you need that curved edge to work for you. You have to be really careful when you're doing this kind of cutting that you don't cut yourself. Let's go outside and try some more stuff with this knife. Here's a little bandit cameo for where I'm setting up to do my testing. He just loves hanging around. Here's how the knife looks on my belt. Good height, easy to grab, easy to return. If it was over here, it'd be much higher and I'd be feeling really weird. Here I got some spruce, and as I always say, a knife like this is designed not to be batoning big, heavy, hard stuff. You cut off corners of stuff, just to get a little bit of wood for some kindling. You don't use a knife like this to, do big things, because if this was your only knife, you want to keep this edge good as long as possible, right? Especially if you're in a survival situation. So don't go hogging off a huge thing. Just take off a little bit at a time. And there's a big knot on that wood there. Let's see what I can do here. Let's try it on this side. And just take off a little bit at a time and use that for kindling. There's a knot down there. Oh, I won't be going through that knot, I don't think. I don't even think I want to try. But let's see. Yeah. Okay. So I went through a hard knot, not a huge one, but a hard one. The edge is perfect. That was spruce. Here's some elm, which is a hardwood, which again, I would just use it to take off a little bit at a time here. just to make something like this for kindling. It's just not wise to try to take off a big chunk of wood. Not bad. Can it make feather sticks? You bet your booty it can. I especially love the sneak up trail for this. Now, I could do a whole bunch, but you can see it works just fine. And for sparks, I'm going to try throwing sparks with this jimped area back here instead of this part that they sanded down. Watch this. I'm not going to make a fire. We've got a fire ban in this town, so I won't start a fire. And on that sharpened area that they produced, back to the jimped area. See, they didn't even need to do that. It was good enough without it. But since it's there, it's good. Great knife for using outdoors to accomplish all the tasks you want to accomplish. At least I think so. Okay, so now that all the tests are done and everything's complete, what do you think? Would you buy this knife? Well, if you would, please use my links in the description below. You can pick this coating or black or titanium coating. I would really appreciate it if you would use my links. I get a little bit of a commission that way. This channel runs off of donations and money that I make on referrals. I live on a disability pension, so I don't have an awful lot of money, so I don't use my family income to pay for this hobby. I wouldn't do that to my family or my wife. So whatever I can get in from this channel is what I use to get some knives. I buy about half the knives that I review, and I have either discounts that I sometimes get from some manufacturers or from vendors like GearBest. They often donate knives for me to review. And once I've reviewed them, they are mine to do with whatever I want to, including selling them. But I will be keeping this knife, I think. I did sell the version that I had earlier last year, and I felt bad about selling it shortly after I sold it. So I'm glad I've got another one. That tells you something about how much I like this knife. I like it a fair bit. It's not perfect, what knife is, but I think it's a reasonable knife. I recommend it. I don't recommend it super highly. It has to suit the kinds of needs that you're looking for. And if you think that it does that, there you go. Thank you so much for liking this channel. Thank you for subscribing, clicking on that bell so that you'll be notified of every video, and commenting and sharing with your friends. All those things really help this channel an awful lot. It does make a good difference if you subscribe. That does help this channel. Thank you for clicking on like, the thumbs up button, and letting your friends know about this channel. And remember to always cut towards your chum and not your thumb.